Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well, and in today's video is pretty special because this is my very first collab. I can hardly believe I actually collabed with someone. I never thought I actually would collab with someone, but I did. And who I collabed with is Charlotte's BookNook, and she talks about different middle grade and YA, which stands for young adult or teens. I don't know why they call it young adult when the only age range in that category for adult would be 18, which that's still a teenager. So I just don't know why they don't call it teen books instead of YA or young adult. But anyway, that's beside the point. Anyway, she talks about those different types of books, and she talks about clean books, but if she reads something that is not clean or has something that is clean that just has some content in it that she's not nuts about, or doesn't agree with, or she knows that someone might not agree with, she mentions it in her videos. But she also has something called Goodreads, which I actually have this app too, but I'm still trying to figure out how it works. But on there she gets into more detail about these different books, so I highly recommend her channel because it is harder to find reviews on books versus movies. So I am grateful to Charlotte and some other people I have found that thankfully do tell about these, they review these different books, and they tell a little bit about them. Charlotte doesn't give spoilers. Unlike me, I actually do. I talk about everything in the different episode reviews that I've done, and I will continue to do that with again, different episodes that I plan on reviewing of different kids shows. And I will probably be doing the same thing with books. I did that with one of the Nancy Drew books that I reviewed, the Black Creek Farm. But yes, I highly recommend Charlotte's channel. She's done a great job. She is so good. I think she's my favorite person that I have found that reviews these different books. I'm not just saying that, I do mean that. And so yeah, after this video, go check out her channel. And like I said before at the beginning of this video, we did a collab where I had her to read this book. Now, I actually already knew what happened, so yeah, I'd actually listened to this. I listened to an audiobook of this, I think it was a year ago now, or almost a year ago. Maybe two? No. I think it was a year or almost a year ago. I listened to an audiobook of this, and it is so good. This book is my favorite book in the Nancy Drew Diaries series, and it is so good. So yeah. I had Charlotte read it, and I will be linking the video where she talks about this book in the description, so you guys can check that out. And please check out her other videos. She is truly amazing. Honestly, I really mean it. She, I think, is the absolute best book reviewer that I've seen. But anyway, so let me get into my personal thoughts on this book, and right after this, please go watch Charlotte's review on this book. Now, she does also talk about other books in that video, and maybe you guys might be interested in one of those other books she talks about, or some other book she mentions in one of her other videos. Okay, so now let me share my opinions on this is book 4 in the Nancy Drew Diaries series, and this is called Once Upon a Thriller. Okay, so in this book, Nancy and her two friends, George and Bess, are going to be staying at this lake in this cabin, and once they get to the town where this lake is at. I forget what the town's called. Oh boy. I honestly forget what the town's called, but once they get there and they get into town, they see that this bookstore had actually caught on fire, and there was going to be a book signing by a well-known author that happens to write mysteries that lives in this town. And one of the fans pointed out that once it's mentioned that the fire was probably started by faulty wiring in the chandelier, one of the fans of this lady author's books points out that that is the very same thing that happens in her latest book, which is called Burned. And I'm just going to say they mentioned some of this, or they mentioned the books that this lady writes, and some of them they give a few details about, and oh my goodness, they sound so cool. I feel like I could make a whole video just on those books. They sound so cool. But I'll get more into that in a minute. So, Nancy and her friends, I think more so her friends, or at least George, I think, is wondering if there's a mystery here. And it's also interesting because once they get some supplies, because Nancy accidentally forgot not only her book that she was going to bring with her on this weekend vacation, but she also forgot the food that they had packed, or that Nancy's housekeeper had packed for them. So they have to go get some more supplies and, things that they'll need for the weekend. And they run into the, actually before this, they meet this lady that works at this hotel, or motel actually. I think they called it a motel. Anyway, and she actually becomes a suspect of this case, and once they're at the store, they bump into the owner of the bookstore, and she actually drops a piece of paper, and it has a combination on it, and there's a part later on in the story where Nancy and her friends are trying to figure out what the combination means, which they talk a little bit about here, but it comes back later on. But I'm just going to say real quick that I don't like how the combination and something else that's getting ready to happen in this book at this point was just brushed off. So yeah, even though I love this story, I don't really like how that was just brushed off, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later because I want to stay on track here. So anyway, they take a canoe out in the lake, and a storm comes up, and their boat capsizes, and they come to shore on, it's actually the land where this author lady and her husband lived, and they don't like trespassers. So they call the police, and the police, or at least the one police officer, even though Nancy and her friend's boat capsized and they got caught in a storm, the police officer still treats them like trespassers and even warns them to stay out of trouble. And it's like, they didn't do anything wrong. I mean, they didn't ask for the weather to be like this. They didn't ask for their boat to get capsized. I mean, come on. So yeah, that was unnecessary. But anyway, then they have a stalker at their cabin, and they call the police again. Well, they actually call the police this time. I should have said the police are actually called again. It's these same two guys. But I think it was actually right after their boat capsized and the police showed up the first time, is when they find out that a painting or sculpture, of that was actually created by the author lady's husband was stolen. And later on in the story, Nancy does start thinking that someone is starting to frame this lady author, and it's actually really interesting. Now, this is the part I love. I would listen to this audiobook again, or if I ever get the physical copy of this book, I would probably read this part first some of the time because I love this part. This is the part where Nancy researches the different books that the lady has. Now, actually, she'd already bought the newest book, Burned, and another book called Frame that this lady had written, and she was trying to figure out if someone really is like copying crimes from this lady's book, which, oh my goodness, that plot line sounds so cool. And as someone who likes to write myself, I just think that this is just such a good idea. I guess that's why I love this story so much. And I love this part where Nancy is describing the different books. She names several of them. Again, there's Burned, Framed, Drowned, Stalked, Shadowed, Drugged, Ditched, Consumed. I can never remember the rest. Burned, Framed. I think those are the only ones I can ever remember. I think there's more. I think she said there was 24 of them. I think Nancy says in the book there's 24 books, I think. I'm honestly not sure. But I'm pretty sure there are more, but I can never remember what they are. Those are the only ones I can remember. And the only ones that we ever get any information about is Burned, Framed. I think we get a little information about Drowned. And I forget if we get any information about Stalked or Shadowed. I think it's Shadowed that we get a little information about, which hints to the thing with the burglar that they thought they were having in their cabin, the stalker, who they thought was actually breaking into their cabin, which that later on is actually brushed off too. But again, I want to stay on track here, so I'll just mention that later. But yeah, once Nancy reads that that someone was stalking the main character of this book, and she's like, oh my goodness, some of this stuff is similar to what happened to George Bess and me. And she's like, okay, this is getting scary. And oh my goodness, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. But again, the whole breaking into their cabin thing was brushed off later. And again, I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. But oh my goodness, I just love this scene. I might even listen to this part here in a little bit, because oh my goodness, I really like this scene. This is my favorite scene in the whole book. And I even seen another book review where someone reviewed the same book, and they were like, if only we could read this author lady's books. And I'm like, yeah, that would really be cool. Maybe who really wrote this Once Upon a Thriller book, maybe they could make a spin-off series. That would be cool. And maybe even sign it as the book author Lacey O'Brien, because that's the name of the author lady. That's the pen name that she goes by. And oh my goodness, that would be so cool. And again, some of the books aren't talked about, it doesn't say what they're about. I'm interested to find out what Consumed could have been about. I'm scared to know what Dragged or Ditched is about, especially Dragged. Oof, I bet that one's creepy. But I wonder, I'm not sure if Lacey O'Brien's books are supposed to be adult books or YA books. I'm not sure. Probably YA. I don't know though. I do know that all the books are mysteries, but I don't know, I don't know, if they're supposed to be adult books or YA books. I mean, I kind of do wish that the book might have gotten into a little bit more information about him, or maybe in the future, maybe Nancy could meet up with this lady author again and solve another mystery. And oh my goodness, it would be so cool if we could get more information about these books and maybe some other books that she's working on or has written since this event. Oh my goodness, that would be so cool. I feel like I can make a whole video just on this one scene, just on those books that we don't know that much about, if, anything, because, again, some books we don't even know what they're about, like Consumed, Dragged, Ditched, which I don't care what Dragged or Ditched is about, and I think there is more, but, I think Nabbed was one of them, but those ones I mentioned before are the only ones I can ever remember. But again, I think there is one called Nabbed, but I think there is some more, and I can't remember what they are. So yeah. But judging by their names, they sound like they're in a series. I kind of wish we could have gotten a little bit more information about Lacey O'Brien's books. Like, did she only write series? Did she ever write any standalones? Because it doesn't sound like these books are standalone. It sounds like they're in a series. So, yeah. But anyway, so Nancy starts investigating the case, and she even acts like she's a reporter to get information, and she interviews the bookstore owner. She even meets Lacey O'Brien. She meets up with her a couple of times, and she interviews the guy that works at the museum where this author lady's husband's where Lacey O'Brien's husband's sculpture was stolen. Was it a sculpture or painting? Oh my goodness. I think it was a sculpture. Oh my goodness. I have listened to this book not too long ago, and some of it I can't even remember little bits of it. But oh my goodness. So forgive my little memory fog here. But anyway. And meanwhile, Nancy is getting threatening messages that have been written by a, typewriter. It hasn't been written by hand or by, a computer. It was typed by a typewriter. Or, with a typewriter, I should say. So, Nancy and her boyfriend Ned start looking for a typewriter, and they go to this antique shop. And she asks if they have a typewriter, and he says that he sold it, and yeah. Now, one thing that Charlotte actually mentioned in her review of it is that Nancy does lie a lot, and there are times where she doesn't necessarily, have to. I mean, it's never good to lie, but still, she, it wasn't like a life or death situation where she chose to lie to keep herself alive or someone else, or keep the bad guy from knowing the truth. Nothing like that. And yeah, I personally don't have a problem with that. I'm not saying I like that. I do not. But she did make a good point about that, because she also mentions that someone had told her that they were not allowed to read the older Nancy Drew books because of the, I guess, all the lying that Nancy does, even in the old books. And, when she was talking about this, I'm kind of like, that's a pretty good point, because Nancy's supposed to be like a role model. She was a strong female character before female characters were even an a lead. I think Nancy Drew was probably the first strong female character in a book, I guess, because we're talking back in the 1930s or something. I think that's when Nancy Drew was first published, and they were republished later into the books we now know today. But that is, the older books. But it is interesting that Nancy would have that flaw, which I guess maybe you can look at it as, just a flaw that makes her more human. Because as I've heard before that Nancy's kind of mostly like superhuman and she doesn't really have any flaws. But I do know one book where it does seem like she does have some flaws, unlike in some other books. So maybe the original author and the people that revised the books, maybe that's what they were going for. Maybe that's why they had her lie, because maybe they thought that would be considered a flaw. I mean, we are talking about books that came out way before most of us were probably even born, like the 1930s to like, I think one of the books was like redone in the 1970s or 80s or something, so I'm sure most of us were probably not even born yet. So, yeah. But anyway, something like that wouldn't keep me from reading the older Nancy Drew books or even this book, even though this series does have some books in it that either I just don't like them or they have content in them I personally don't agree with, even if it's not to the point to where I would never read it or listen to it again. But yeah, Charlotte did bring up a good point, because I do know that Nancy Drew has been like a role model, and again, she was a strong female character really before her time, or before the time of like girl power. So that was a good point. That really was a good point. But again, I guess it was just considered a flaw, I guess. But yeah, not the best role model there, or at least, not the best action there, Nancy, especially in the Nancy Drew Diaries series, because this isn't the only time she does this kind of thing. And I know in one book she pulls a pretty serious stunt. Actually, in a couple books she kind of pulls some crazy stunts that are dishonest. So, yeah. Not the best role model there, Nancy, or at least you're not being the best role model exactly. But hey, we're not perfect, no one's perfect, so I guess you can just look at that as a flaw. But anyway, so then finally Nancy solves the case, and come to find out the bookstore owner had actually set the fire herself. She had messed with the wires to make it look like the fire was started by faulty wires. And from what I couldn't remember, again, here's my memory fog again, something about the lady was upset that she was jealous of the author lady, Lacey O'Brien, and I do know that the bookstore owner actually once liked Lacey O'Brien's husband, and yeah, there's just some jealousy there, and yeah. So she gets arrested, and the her husband's artwork is returned, and yeah. And okay, now I can talk about it. At the very end, when I mentioned the combination, we find out that that was completely useless and pointless. It was just pointless. Yeah. And the thing about the stalker at the cabin, where they thought someone was trying to break into their cabin, or just stalking them, actually turned out to be a bear. Yeah. So they brushed off two things in the story that could have been pretty interesting. So yeah, that's really my only complaint about this story, is that they brush off not just one thing, but two separate things in this story. They just brush it off at the very end. So yeah. But other than that, I think this book is great, and I'm so glad that this was the first book of the series I listened to, and I think it's absolutely great. I still hope I'll be able to own this someday, and yeah. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this book review of the Nancy Drew Diaries series, Book 4, Once Upon a Thriller. And again, please go check out Charlotte's videos. Again, the video where she talks about this book will be in my description. So go check that out, and see you guys soon. Bye.